Amy Ferrier lines up one of her famous skull shots and misses. Oh, she misses again. And she shoots, scores! The crowd here on Lunar Transfer Station Tacoma goes wild. Ooh, we love you. Amy, you're amazing. But now I think they're ready. Ready for...
Lunar Transfer Station Tacoma. Commercial Cargo Transit Facility.
Walking simulators have fascinated me since they first burst onto the scene. Part of the novelty is that they're a fairly recent genre, at least in their modern incarnation, but I think that their major draw is that they explore different ways to deliver a video game narrative. I think we can relatively safely, though please do correct me if I'm wrong, pinpoint the modern birth of the genre as Dear Esther.
Dear Esther, I've lost track of how long I've been here.
The game started life as a source mod in 2008 before receiving its fully fledged release in 2012. It places you on a desolate Hebridean island, narrated letters to your character's dead wife playing out as you wander towards the pulsing radio tower which dominates the landscape. The game is purposely sparing with its environmental storytelling, limiting your agency to the paths you take and how long you linger on them. The bleak island, coupled with the haunting score by Jessica Curry, evoke the sense of isolation that the game is striving for. Dear Esther deals with guilt and loss, firmly placing you in a character's shoes.
I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic, and I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
The audio logs that form the narrative are fragmented and poetic, playing out in a random fashion as you walk the island's paths. Piecing them together into something meaningful is left up to the player. The real achievement of the game is that it acknowledges the differences inherent in the medium of video games. It explores how to deliver a video game story, rather than hanging a story onto the skeleton created by a game's mechanics. Next came 2013's Gone Home, which takes the groundwork laid by Dear Esther and builds it outwards, in another direction, a mutation of the design philosophy behind that game. It too takes the stance of exploring the ways in which video games can deliver a story, but its approach gives the player two things Dear Esther doesn't. A richly detailed environment which tells stories by itself, and the means by which to interact with that environment. A tactility that lets you throw tissue boxes around to your heart's content. This environmental storytelling is, like Dear Esther's narration, fragmentary by design. Small chunks to be interacted with, leaving it up to you to tease out the connections and underlying stories behind them. You take the role of some sort of voyeuristic video game archaeologist, putting together a narrative jigsaw from the limited pieces provided to you. Gone Home retains some sense of a linear storyline in the face of this fragmentation by locking certain doors in the house, but within these contained spaces it lets you chaotically discover storylines, in whatever order you wish. You can search through every drawer and poke about in every cupboard. Hell, you can even just ignore all the extraneous detail and push on with unlocking the next door, uncovering the barest of details of all the other stories which lie underneath. Despite their differences, Gone Home and Dear Esther did share one important approach in their design. They both were about uncovering stories which took place in the past. You arrive in the game post the fact, the main event and catalyst for the story having already taken place. You're there to pick up the pieces. Enter Firewatch by Campo Santo, another mutation of the walking simulator. This game gives you a larger environment to truck around in, and you're still able to tumble and fumble the items you come across. But this time, the story told is of a more immediate nature. The game uses player character Henry's ongoing and growing relationship with his supervisor Delilah, all done over walkie-talkie, as the focus.
This shale slide is steep. How do you expect me to get down this?
I don't remember it being that bad. It's not even named on our topos.
What about Shitty Boss is gonna get me killed hill?
Oh, is Is that Absorka Indian? Maybe Creek?
It's actually English for not in my job description.
The chatter back and forth with choice over your responses, coupled with the objects strewn about the environment, form the backbone of the story's delivery. This method makes the story feel lived in rather than voyeuristic. You're playing it out rather than dusting it off. The recently released What Remains of Edith Finch is another walking simulator that takes yet another approach to involving you in the story. The game takes the voyeur-cheology of Gone Home and Dear Esther in that it lets you explore a space, while also allowing a sense of immediacy and empathy by placing you inside the final moments of the people who live there. The game also features one of the most heartbreaking stories I've encountered in a video game, marrying the act of control with the story being told. We won't go too far into that here in order to avoid spoilers, but I highly recommend going to check it out. Treat yourself and have a little cry. And now, we finally come to Tacoma, the latest in the line of walking simulators. Being part of this genre inevitably entails some similarities to what's come before, but it manages to both build upon and add its own quirks to create a unique experience. Again, you play the role of both explorer and voyeur. The framing for the story has you tasked with retrieving an AI from a space station whose initial emptiness gives way to the ghosts and echoes left behind by the crew. Tacoma comes from Fulbright, the developers of Gone Home, and it's therefore not entirely surprising that they share some of the same basic DNA. Both opt for telling stories through the space itself rather than relying entirely on narration. There's food cans to caress, Christmas ducks to coo over, and some things that should possibly have never been uncovered, really. This method allows each player to forge their way through the game's spaces, unpicking the narrative in their own way. Seeing the blobby AR version of Margaret Catwood, the station's cat, may lead one player to rename their real-life cat in recognition of the ultimate cat name having been found, while another player might completely miss or not care about this detail, instead relating to the panic attack of the space station's doctor and how she copes with that. Some players may never even find a mousey. Those poor souls. But this all lends the meat of the game a personal connection. You took the effort to find these things, these snippets of information. You pieced them together. The stories and people of this station are revealed layer-like. Pieces of evidence that you are encouraged to link together by yourself. Tacoma's major innovation comes in the crew's echoes, little AR segments where multiple conversations swirl, combine and disperse. This is somewhat like a video game equivalent of immersive theatre, the audience placed among the actors with the choice of whether to circulate, to dip in and out of storylines, or whether to follow a single actor across the whole performance. However, unlike immersive theatre, there are no stakes here. By following an individual, you aren't excluding yourself from experiencing the rest of the performance. At the end of an immersive theatre piece, you go home having sampled one view or perspective on the piece, whereas Tacoma lets you rewind, pause and fast-forward conversations at will, sniffing out and listening to all the facets of each segment. This lends Tacoma a less unique sense of discovery than that of immersive theatre, but I think it fits the trappings of a video game better this way, rather than allowing only one playthrough of each segment with no rewinds, which would have just been frustrating, to be honest. It's a beautiful and innovative way of telling a video game story, and Tacoma deserves praise for it. Well done, Tacoma. Well done. So there we have it, a potted history of the walking simulator with its various twists and turns along the path so far. Where it will go next is anyone's guess, but you can bet it will get there by walking.